You're done. Done from our table, done from our life. Done forever. My fiancée screamed after I reported her daughter for claiming $5,200 from my account. It was my bonus. Her mom smirked. We needed it for the engagement party. I said nothing. I froze every account, canceled their rent, their lights went out mid-speech. I woke up to 147 missed calls. I found out my bonus was gone in the middle of my own engagement dinner. Not before, not the next morning, not from a bank alert I could deal with quietly in the hallway. Right there, while my son was still standing near the kitchen island holding a paper plate he had stopped eating from. The room smelled like catered pasta, vanilla candles, and those two sweet roses Denise insisted on putting everywhere because her mother said white flowers looked classy. Her mother, Valerie, was at the head of the table like she had personally arranged the moon and stars for the evening. My fiancée, Kendra, stood beside her with one hand on her wine glass and the other flashing her ring every time she laughed. My son, Owen, was 11. Quiet kid, thin shoulders, big eyes, the kind of boy who said thank you, even when people handed him something they clearly bought at the last minute. He had spent 2 afternoons painting a small wooden star chart for Kendra and me. I was an astrologer by trade, not the neon sign kind. I ran a private practice, wrote monthly forecasts for a subscription newsletter, and taught small workshops online. I paid my bills reading patterns, timing, and people. I made a decent living doing it. Enough to put money away, enough to buy a townhouse in Charlotte, enough to believe I was building something stable. Owen had painted our birth signs in gold and dark blue. He had written, in his careful block letters, "For your new beginning." He was proud of it. He waited until dessert came out to hand it over. Kendra looked at it for maybe 2 seconds. Then her daughter, Macy, leaned across the counter, laughed under her breath, and said, "That's kind of embarrassing." Nobody corrected her. Kendra gave a little smile like she was too stressed to deal with it. Valerie took a sip of wine and said, "Well, handmade things are sweet when they come from actual little children." Owen froze. He was 11, not 5, and he understood tone better than any of them gave him credit for. I watched his fingers tighten around the edge of the plate. He did not cry. He did not argue. He just stepped back half a pace and lowered his eyes to the floor, like if he made himself small enough, maybe nobody would keep going. That would have been enough to ruin the night. But then my phone buzzed. One alert, then another. I glanced down out of habit, expecting a client payment or a calendar reminder. Instead, I saw a transfer confirmation. Then a fraud review text from my bank. $5,200 had left my personal account 23 minutes earlier. My bonus. The one from a publishing contract I had just cleared that morning. For a second, I genuinely thought I was reading it wrong. My brain refused to line up the numbers. Then I opened the banking app and saw the transaction history, clear as daylight. The transfer had been authorized using my saved device access. I looked up slowly. Macy was standing by the counter, twirling my spare office key on one finger. She was 19, old enough to know exactly what she was doing, old enough to call it theft, not a mistake. I said very calmly, "Who moved money out of my account?" The room shifted. Not one dramatic record scratch moment, just a tiny, ugly stillness. Macy rolled her eyes first. Then Kendra set her glass down too hard and said, "Stephen, not now." I looked at Macy again. "Did you take $5,200 from me?" She crossed her arms. "I didn't take it. I used it." My throat went tight. "For what?" Valerie smirked before Macy could answer. "We needed it for the engagement party. Like that settled it. Like my money had simply drifted to its rightful place." Kendra's face hardened, not with shame, with irritation. At me. "You got the bonus?" She said, "The venue balance was due. The florist wanted the rest. We all agreed this party mattered." "No," I said. "You agreed." Macy actually laughed. "Please, you were going to pay for it anyway." Owen was still standing there with his little wooden star chart on the counter between the cake plates and champagne glasses, hearing every word. Then Kendra snapped. She pointed at the front door and screamed, "You're done. Done from our table. Done for our life. Done forever." At first, I thought she meant Owen. That was the part I felt in my chest. Not the theft, not the money. The fact that my first instinct was that she was throwing my child away in front of a room full of people. I looked at Owen. His face had gone pale, but he was trying so hard not to move. Not to make it worse, that old, terrible politeness children learn when adults are unsafe. I said nothing. I picked up his star chart with one hand and my phone with the other. Then I told Owen, "Go get your backpack from the hall chair." He nodded once and left the room. Nobody tried to stop him. Nobody apologized. Valerie just reached for another strawberry off the dessert tray. Like this was all a misunderstanding that would pass if they stayed still long enough. That was when I understood something I should have understood months earlier. This was not about a party. This was not about one rude teenager with my bank login. This was not about wedding stress. This was about a pattern that had been building brick by brick while I kept calling it compromise. I was 42 years old, a widower for 6 years, a father for 11, and somehow I had let myself become a wallet in my own home. My name was Stephen Hale. I lived outside Charlotte, North Carolina. I worked as an astrologer, which people either found fascinating or ridiculous until they needed me to tell them whether to sign a contract, leave a marriage, or launch a business in October versus November. I had built that practice from nothing after my wife died. Late nights, cheap website, endless readings, podcasts, newsletters, one-on-one consultations, all of it. When Kendra came into my life, I was tired enough to mistake attention for kindness. She had charm, she had momentum, she had a way of making plans sound like love. She also had a daughter and a mother who treated every resource I had as communal property the second they figured out I was too embarrassed to say no in public. It started small. Could I cover dinner because Kendra's paycheck had been weird that week? Could I put the deposit on a beach rental for all of us and let them pay me back later? Could I loan Macy $800 for a laptop because school was so important right now? Could I help Valerie with her car insurance just this once because she was between payments? Could I move Kendra's rent onto my card for a month so she could catch up? Then it became normal. A monthly transfer for Kendra's half of expenses, even after she moved into my townhouse and kept her apartment, just in case. A phone bill I quietly absorbed because Macy's line was bundled in. A dental payment plan for Valerie after a long speech about family showing up for each other. A $1,400 sofa for Kendra's old apartment because she said we needed a place to host bridal planning nights. A weekend trip to Asheville for Macy's birthday, which somehow became my expense, despite being organized by Valerie. By the time we were officially engaged, I was paying for things I had not agreed to in rooms I had not even been in. And every time I hesitated, Kendra had the same script. "You're overthinking. We're about to be family. You always make money feel cold." What made it worse was how they treated Owen. Not openly at first. Nothing clear enough to point to without sounding dramatic. They forgot his food order, but remembered Macy's extra sauce. They bought matching holiday pajamas for the kids and handed him a plain gray t-shirt 2 days later. Valerie once introduced him to friends as Steven's boy while calling Macy my granddaughter. At Thanksgiving, Macy got the bedroom with the balcony for studying, and Owen got an air mattress in the laundry room because he was easygoing. He never complained. That was the worst part. Children like Owen break your heart quietly. They notice everything, they excuse it for you, they carry it in their shoulders and their appetite and the way they stop asking for things. I saw it. I always saw it. I just kept telling myself that once the wedding was over, once the stress was down, once everyone felt secure, the cruelty would ease. It did not ease. It sharpened. 2 weeks before the engagement party, I had told Kendra I was not paying another dollar toward her mother's downsized apartment. I had already covered the moving truck, the storage unit, and the first month's deposit. Valerie wanted custom curtains and a dining set she absolutely could not afford. Kendra said it was important for her mother's dignity. I said no. Not angry, not loud. Just no. That same night, Valerie told Owen he had such a solemn face, and maybe he should stay upstairs when guests came because people liked cheerful kids at celebrations. I should have ended it then. Instead, I helped string lights in the backyard. I helped move chairs. I picked up a cake I did not choose and paid the balance on a tent rental I had not approved. And on the night they mocked my son's gift and stole my bonus, I finally ran out of excuses faster than I ran out of patience. Owen came back with his backpack. I took him home. The drive was silent except for the turn signal and the soft tap of the star chart against the seat every time I turned a corner. Owen held it on his lap the whole way. About 10 minutes in, he asked, "Did I do something wrong?" I gripped the steering wheel harder. No. He waited. Then he asked, "Did she mean me when she said done forever?" That nearly cracked me open. "No," I said. And then, because the truth mattered more than comfort, I added, "But she was cruel, and I'm sorry I brought you there." He looked out the window after that. When we got home, I told him to shower and put on his blue pajama pants, the soft ones. I heated leftover soup, though he barely ate. Then I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, my phone, and every password manager I had. I did not send a dramatic text. I did not call to warn anyone. I made one clean move after another. First, I froze every personal and joint linked account they had ever touched. Savings, checking, the card Kendra used for household groceries, the backup card Macy had for emergencies, all of it. Then I changed my banking credentials, email passwords, cloud access, phone passcodes, and office entry codes. Then I logged into the landlord portal for Kendra's apartment. Yes, she still had it. Yes, I had been covering most of the rent because she swore she would give it up after the wedding. I canceled the pending payments scheduled for the 1st. Then I removed my card entirely. I saved the confirmation screens as PDFs. Then I called the fraud department and reported the transfer. I used the plain language that felt impossible 30 minutes earlier. Unauthorized access. Financial theft. Household connection compromised. The woman on the phone asked if I knew who had made the transfer. Yes, I said. Her name is Macy Donnelly. Once that report was filed, I called the utility company for the apartment because, of course, those bills were also in my name. Kendra had said it was temporary while she rebuilt her credit. I moved the electricity account back to tenant responsibility effective immediately. The agent said there could be interruption if the new responsible party did not establish service by morning. I understand, I said. Then I sat there in the quiet kitchen, looking at the confirmation email on my screen. It was 11:48 p.m. Owen came downstairs for water and found me still there. He looked at the laptop. "Are you working?" "In a way." He nodded. Then he touched the corner of the star chart he had left near my elbow. "You can still keep it," he said, "even if she didn't want it." I had to look away for a second. "I'm keeping it," I said. He went back upstairs. At 7:12 the next morning, my phone lit up. Kendra, then Macy, then Valerie, then Kendra again. By 8 o'clock, I had 31 missed calls and 14 texts. By 9:30, Kendra was pounding on my front door. I did not open it. I checked the camera feed from my phone and watched her pace in heels from the night before, hair half fallen, face bright with rage. She called. I answered this time. "You reported Macy?" she shouted. "Yes. She is 19, Stephen. You could ruin her future. She transferred $5,200 out of my personal account. For our party." "No," I said. "For your party." Then Valerie's voice cut in from somewhere near the doorbell camera. "You turned the rent off? I stopped paying it. You can't do this in the middle of a family crisis." I almost laughed at that. "A family crisis would involve concern for my child," I said. "This is a billing problem." Kendra started crying then, but it was the angry kind, sharpened by humiliation. "You are so cold." "No," I said. "I've been too soft." There was a long silence. Then she hissed, "You're punishing all of us over one misunderstanding." I thought of Owen standing there with that star chart in his hands while they smirked over my stolen money. "It was not one misunderstanding," I said. "It was a pattern. The money ends here." I hung up. At 11:06, right when Valerie was apparently in the middle of gathering relatives for a sympathy speech at the apartment complex clubhouse, the lights in Kendra's apartment went out. I know this because Macy sent me a video by accident while trying to send it to someone else. The camera shook, people yelled, somebody laughed nervously, And Valerie's voice rose above the dark like this was a personal attack staged for maximum drama. I did not answer. By noon, the missed calls were past 60. By evening, they were over 100. When I woke up the next morning, there were 147 missed calls. That number should have made me feel powerful. It did not. It made me feel tired. My younger sister Nora called around 10. I actually answered because she never called unless it mattered. I heard, she said. From who? Everyone. Kendra's posted 3 statuses about narcissists and financial abuse. I rubbed my forehead. Of course she has. Nora was quiet for a beat. Then she said, Stephen, I'm going to say this once. I always thought you were being generous. I didn't realize you were being eaten alive. That sat with me. Nora came over that afternoon with bagels and 2 grocery sacks. She was the kind of person who never made a speech when soup would do. She sat with Owen in the living room while he worked on a puzzle. She did not ask nosy questions. She just told him his star chart looked professional and asked whether he wanted hot chocolate. Later, while Owen was upstairs, she looked around my kitchen table at the pile of printed confirmations and banknotes. You really ended it. Yes. Are you sad? I thought about that. I'm embarrassed, I said, and relieved. Both. She nodded like that made perfect sense. The backlash came in waves. First, guilt. Valerie texting paragraphs about sacrifice, loyalty, and what a woman gives up to welcome a man and his child into her family, which would have been more persuasive if she had ever actually welcomed Owen into anything. Then, accusation. Kendra said I had manipulated the entire relationship by weaponizing stability. Macy sent one spectacular message, calling me petty, creepy, and spiritually fake, which was rich, coming from the person who stole from an astrologer and then acted surprised when timing went badly. Then image management. A cousin of Kendra's called to say the engagement party bills were still outstanding, and perhaps, as the man of the relationship, I should settle them quietly to avoid public embarrassment. I told him, I'm not your backup bank. That became my sentence. I used it with everyone. When Kendra said I was ruining her credit, I said, I'm not your backup bank. When Valerie said real men protect the women they plan to marry, I said, I'm not your backup bank. When Macy said I owed her mother for all the emotional labor she invested in me, I said, I'm not your backup bank. No yelling, no essays, just the line. The fraud case moved faster than they expected because Macy had been careless. She used my saved login from my office tablet the week before when Kendra borrowed it to print seating charts. There were timestamps, IP records, device links. Nothing glamorous. Just stupid and traceable. They returned part of the money within 5 business days, suddenly very eager to avoid confusion. Not all of it, but enough to confirm the story. Kendra wanted to meet in person after that. I agreed only because I was done being cornered at my house or in parking lots. We met at a coffee shop on a Tuesday morning while Owen was at school. She looked beautiful in a strained, brittle way. Mascara, perfect. Jaw tight. Engagement ring gone. She sat down and said, I need to understand how you became this person. I almost smiled. This person? The one who could destroy us over money. There it was again. The clean edit. As if the money had appeared out of nowhere, and my child had not stood in that room being quietly erased. So I said it plainly. This is not because of money. This is because you let your daughter steal from me, your mother mock my son, and then you screamed us out of your life when I asked a direct question. She looked down at the table. Macy was wrong. It was the first honest sentence she had managed. But, she added immediately, you could have handled it privately. Like every other thing I handled privately? I asked. She had no answer for that. I told her I would return the spare things of hers still in my house in labeled boxes through Nora. I told her any remaining financial matters could go through email only. I told her there would be no wedding and no joint future to discuss. She leaned back then, eyes flat. So that's it. That's it after everything I gave you? I looked at her for a long moment. She really believed that was the ledger, not what she took, what she gave. I stood up. What I needed, I said, was a home where my son was safe from humiliation. You were never building that. Then I left. The quiet after that was not immediate. It came in pieces. A week with no calls from Valerie. 3 days without Macy posting something vague and poisonous online. Then a whole Sunday where nobody from that side tried to drag me back into their emergency. Owen changed before I did. He started eating normally again. He stopped hovering in doorways when my phone rang. He asked if he could put the star chart in my office instead of hiding it in his room. So we framed it. Nothing fancy. Dark wood, simple glass. I hung it above the bookshelf where I kept client notebooks and ephemerides. He stood back and studied it like he was checking whether it belonged there. "It looks real," he said. "It is real." A month later, on the night that should have been our wedding shower, I made spaghetti and garlic bread. Nora came over with her twins. Owen laughed so hard at something stupid involving grated cheese and a dropped fork that he snorted water through his nose. It was such a normal sound. It hit me harder than the screaming had, because that was what I had almost traded away. Not money, not pride. Peace. The symbolic ending came in early spring. I found a small round table at an estate sale. Old oak, scarred at the edge, sturdy as anything. Not expensive, just solid. I put it in the breakfast nook by the front window where the light came in soft in the mornings. Owen and I started eating there on Saturdays. Pancakes sometimes, toast and fruit other times. No centerpiece, no performance, no one ranking who belonged. One Saturday, he brought down a fresh sketchbook page. It was another star map. This one was simpler than the first. Just two constellations, side by side, connected by a thin gold line. Mine and his. At the bottom, he had written, "Our table." I kept that one too. And if there was any lesson in what happened, it was not about revenge or even justice in the dramatic sense people like to imagine. It was smaller and harder than that. People who profit from your silence will call your boundary cruelty. People who use your resources but diminish your child will always say, "You changed the moment you stopped funding them." And sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is not argue better, explain longer, or forgive deeper. Sometimes it is one calm financial decision made all the way through. I was not their bank. I was Owen's father. Once I finally acted like it, the house got quieter, and so did my mind.